Hello, everyone. This is Devan and Serafino. I wish you all well. I hope you're doing the very best that you can be on today. I wanted to talk to you about doing like a primal reset in order to like remember who you are and really where you came from. This speaks to taking ourselves back to a time before we had trauma, before we were in codependent relationships, before we had fucked up attachment styles, before we accepted the limitations and habits and addictions that we struggle with as necessary. Because remember, you were born technically with nothing besides whatever God put in you from the beginning, and then you will leave this earth with, well, the results of however you live this life. But it won't be with habits, with relationships, so to speak, and with addictions and things like that, or with abuses and with trauma. So what am I saying? Things that we pick up along life or things that we picked up along life is not who we were from the beginning. So we either were taught it or we went and dug it up and found it ourselves, whatever it might be, but it wasn't with us from the beginning. So like you learned how to say, be addicted to fast food. You learned how to be addicted to drugs. You learned how to be addicted to sex. You learned how to get in bad relationships and not get untangled from them. You learned how to work. You learned how to do whatever it is. If you learned it, you can unlearn it. And see, what the devil will try to do is try to make you think because you're in this bad relationship, you have to stay there. Like you can't live without this person. That's not true. You were a whole ass person before you met that motherfucking person. You absolutely can live without that person. You just done forgot what it's like to have been you before you met that person. I was like that before. In that relationship I was in, it seemed like I lost myself in it and I forgot who the fuck I was. And then I let that relationship go, cried those bitter fucking tears. And then I'm like, what the fuck was I even thinking? Of course I could live without him. Duh. But it's like when you're in the fucking forest, you can't see the damn trees. So you have to pull away from whatever it is that you're in to get some perspective. But you can live without any fucking thing that you learned, no matter what it is. And so when we get into like a primal reset, it's talking about feeling the feelings, thinking the things that you would think if you had no trauma, if you were not in that bad relationship, if you didn't have those addictions, if you did not have those attachments, negative attachment styles, if you did not have that hurt from the beginning, where you came from God, you had peace, you were whole, you were one. So when we do primal resets, we do this through things like primal body movement exercises that have you like in touch with the ground a lot. You can go out and literally hug a tree, but you're doing it with the intention of understanding that when we touch the ground, when we touch trees, when we're out in nature, this brings us back to the Genesis. Because I believe that every tree in the very earth itself, while the earth is definitely not God, it certainly holds power. And when we touch a tree or a leaf, a piece of grass, a plant, I feel like it connects us back to the Genesis of all things. Every tree and plant and herb around us, all animals and everything, it's like the energy was never really broken, from one thing out in nature to the next. And so if I go and touch a tree or a leaf, what I'm sensing is going all the way back to the beginning of our age, of this time in which we live. And then you can access that power in your present state of mind. If you're meditating, if you're doing psychedelics or whatever, you don't have to be high to do this. You just have to have strong enough intentions and feel the feelings, connecting with the energy from that tree or touching the ground, and just understand that power is there, going all the way back to the beginning of all things, and things were in its purest form. Is what you're trying to do is reset yourself, clear your cache, so to speak, and take yourself back to when you were in your purest form before you had all of these problems. And from this, you can gain courage, and you do have the strength to walk out of codependent relationships. I don't care how many decades they've lasted. You do have the strength to let go of bad habits and bad trains of thinking, or whatever it is that is limiting you, and you know what those things are. What the devil would what Lucifer would try to get you to do is act like you can't let that stuff go, or make you fearful, like you don't have the courage. You do have the courage to do it. Yes, and he knows you have the courage to do it, and he knows what a strong person you will become if you do let it go. And that's why he tries to surround you with negative forces and negative people to help to work to keep you down. That the devil's power is technically not his power. Lucifer is God's son. Okay, he's like that kid that wishes to overthrow his parent, but is never going to work. Lucifer chose to take his power and do bad things with it, and he still does that, but he is not more powerful than God, because whatever power Lucifer has comes from God. He can't do nothing with God. That's why I'm able, through the power of God, to cast out any devil or break any spell that comes before me, because as the scripture says, I've said it once and twice have I heard this, that power belongs to God. It don't belong to nobody else. And so I just wanted to give you this word of encouragement that you do have the power, you have the bravery to work and come up out of whatever it is that has you tied up and bound. You do have the power to come up out of that. Use what you have. Use nature. Connect with it. Look up primal body movements. Consider what I've told you, and understand that we have energy around us through nature, through trees, to connect us back to the genesis and the beginning of all things. We can transmute and alchemize this within ourselves to help us to reset ourselves, to go back to our purest beginning before we had any problems and all of our energy was free and clear.